The day after we settled into our new house, I got a strange phone call from the woman who sold it to us. Her voice was shaking when she said, "I need to show you something urgent. I left my security cameras running by mistake, and I saw what happens in that house when you're not there. Meet me now, and please don't tell anyone where you're going." Hello everyone. Write in the comments which country you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe and press the like button. Enjoy the story. Just 24 hours earlier, Daniel Carter was the luckiest man in his neighborhood. Standing in the wide hallway of his new home, he could smell fresh paint on the walls and newly polished wooden floors. The sound of his footsteps made echoes in the empty rooms. The house on Maple Street had been built in the 1960s. It was big and strong, with thick walls and a beautiful garden. Daniel stood near the large kitchen window, holding a cup of coffee. The warm drink tasted sweet on his tongue. He was 38 years old, but right now he felt like a young boy who just got the best birthday present ever. His wife, Sarah, walked up behind him and put her arms around his waist. Her hands felt soft and warm. "We finally did it," she said with a happy voice, kissing his cheek. 10 years, Daniel. We worked and saved for 10 whole years to buy this place." Daniel turned around to face her. The morning sun made her blonde hair look golden. "I still feel like I'm dreaming," he told her. "When Mrs. Patterson agreed to sell us this beautiful house, I thought she was joking. People don't sell houses like this, Sarah. They keep them in their families forever." "Well, she wanted to move closer to her daughter," Sarah replied, smiling. "And we were lucky enough to help her do that. Now this is our home, our safe place. No more tiny apartments. No more noisy neighbors banging on the walls. You have your own workshop in the garage. I have my art studio upstairs. We earned this, Daniel. We worked hard and we deserve to live here." She lifted her coffee cup and touched it against his. The sound was clear and pretty. Daniel looked at his wife. At 35 years old, she was even more beautiful than when they first met. Her green eyes sparkled with joy. She was the woman who stayed by his side when things got really hard, especially after that terrible accident with his younger brother, Tommy. When Tommy got hurt so badly that the doctor said he would never wake up, it was Sarah who held Daniel together. She took care of everything. The funeral arrangements, the medical bills, even selling their old family cabin to pay off the debts Tommy had left behind. She had been his rock, his strength. "Here's to our new beginning," Daniel said. "And let's leave all the sad memories outside our door." They both drank their coffee. In the quiet house, where they hadn't even put up curtains yet, it felt like time itself had stopped just for them. Daniel walked across the room, looking at a painting leaning against the wall. "The furniture truck is coming tomorrow," he said in a businesslike voice. "I need to go to the construction site in the morning to check on my workers. You can start putting away the kitchen boxes." "Okay," Sarah nodded. "Just make sure you come home early. I don't want to eat our first dinner here all by myself." Daniel gave her that same warm smile he used when talking to important customers. "I always come home, Sarah. You know that." The next morning didn't start with sunshine, but with the loud buzzing of Daniel's phone on the table next to the bed. Sarah opened her eyes and reached for the phone. The screen showed a name: Helen Patterson. Sarah frowned. The sale was finished. The keys were given to them. The money was paid. What did the old lady who used to own this house want now? Daniel was already gone. His side of the bed felt cold. Sarah sat up, wrapped a blanket around herself, and answered the call. "Hello. Sarah, listen very carefully and don't interrupt me." Mrs. Patterson's voice sounded tired and worried. There was no panic, no crying, just a deep sadness. "Are you alone right now?" "Yes, Daniel left early for work." "What's going on?" "Don't tell him about this call." "Liberty Park, the bench near the fountain. 30 minutes. Come by yourself. If you say anything to Daniel about this, I'll disappear and you'll never know the truth about what you bought." "Mrs. Patterson, I don't understand. We bought the house. The lawyer has all the papers." "You bought the building, Sarah," the old woman said quietly. "I sold you the walls. But what's inside those walls is something else. I'm waiting for you. The phone went dead. Sarah put it down slowly. A cold feeling ran through her body. She got dressed quickly, grabbed her purse, and hurried out without even drinking water. The park was almost empty. The fountain was spraying water into the air. The smell of wet grass filled the morning air. Mrs. Patterson sat on a far bench, wearing a long gray coat. She looked much older than she did last week. Sarah walked toward her, trying to stay calm. She owned an art gallery downtown. She was used to keeping a straight face even when she felt scared inside. Hello, Mrs. Patterson. Why all this mystery? If you forgot something in the house, you could have just told me. The old woman looked up at her. Her eyes looked so empty and sad that Sarah felt a chill run down her back. Mrs. Patterson didn't say hello. She reached into her big bag and pulled out a tablet computer in a brown case. Sit down, she ordered. Sarah sat carefully, making sure their coats didn't touch. I didn't forget things, Sarah. I forgot to turn off the security cameras. Daniel thought I was a foolish old woman who didn't know anything about technology, but I knew he didn't trust me. So I put cameras everywhere, even in the basement storage room. Why do I need to know this? Sarah felt a little angry. You and Daniel never liked each other, but spying on people is wrong. Just watch, Mrs. Patterson said, pressing a button on the screen. The video was black and white, a little blurry, but clear enough to see what was happening. It showed the basement storage room in their new house. The door was currently blocked by boxes. Daniel had told her it was just old junk he would throw away soon. In the corner of the screen, numbers showed the time. The recording was from this morning, about 30 minutes ago, exactly when Daniel was supposed to be at his construction site. On the screen, the door opened. Daniel walked into the narrow dark room. He was wearing the same blue shirt Sarah had seen him in that morning. In his hands, he carried a plastic tray with food on it. A bowl of soup, a piece of bread, and a cup of water. Sarah's eyebrows went up in confusion. What is he doing? There's nothing down there except trash. Keep watching, Mrs. Patterson said in a hard voice. Daniel walked deeper into the room toward a wall that looked normal and solid. He bent down and put the tray on the floor. Then he stepped back and crossed his arms. He wasn't standing like someone bringing food to a friend. He was standing like a guard at a prison. From a dark corner near the wall, where the light couldn't reach, a pile of old blankets started to move. Sarah squinted her eyes to see better. The blankets lifted up. It was a person. A man very thin with long messy hair, wearing dirty clothes. He moved slowly toward the tray, like every movement hurt him. He grabbed the bread with shaking hands and started eating it fast, almost choking on it. Daniel said something to him. There was no sound in the video, but from the way Daniel's mouth moved, Sarah could see his expression. It was cold and mean and full of power. He kicked an empty bottle toward the man with his boot, then turned around and walked out, locking the door tightly behind him. The man on the screen was left alone. He lifted his head and looked straight at the hidden camera, like he could feel someone watching. Sarah stopped breathing. Everything around her disappeared. The park, the people, the sounds, all gone. There was only that face on the small screen. Those eyes. She would know those eyes anywhere. They had the same shape as their mother's eyes. The small scar above his left eyebrow from when he fell out of a tree as a kid. This can't be real, Sarah whispered. Her voice came out scratchy and weak. We buried him 10 years ago. The coffin was closed. Daniel identified the body. We have the death certificate. She looked at Mrs. Patterson, hoping this was some kind of terrible joke. But the old woman looked back at her with brutal honesty. A closed coffin is very convenient, Sarah, she said. Especially when your husband is good at solving problems and your brother-in-law owes too much money to dangerous people. Sarah looked back at the screen. The man in the basement was finishing the soup, looking around like a scared animal. It was Tommy. Her husband's little brother, Tommy. The boy she had cried over every month at the cemetery. He was alive, living in her own basement. behind the wall where she had unpacked kitchen dishes just yesterday. The house was never really mine, Mrs. Patterson said quietly, leaning close to Sarah's face. I was never the real owner. I was just the guard. Daniel bought this place 10 years ago using a fake company name and put me here for one reason only: to feed a ghost. He paid me money every month to keep Tommy dead to the world but alive for him. Mrs. Patterson pushed the tablet into Sarah's cold hands and stood up. Now you're the owner, Sarah. Now it's your turn to be the guard. She turned and walked quickly toward the park exit, leaving Sarah alone with a tablet showing her dead brother-in-law eating crumbs off a dirty plate in her new basement. Sarah didn't remember driving home. The road was a blur of red lights and car horns. Only one thought kept repeating in her head like a drumbeat. He's there. He's there. He's there. She walked into the house, trying to breathe normally. The key turned in the lock with a soft click that now sounded like a gun being loaded. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet for a house hiding a living person. Daniel came out of the garage, wiping grease off his hands with a rag. He was still wearing that blue shirt. He smiled at her warmly, openly. The smile of a loving husband happy to see his wife. You're home early, he said. I thought you'd be stuck buying groceries. Want some lunch? I made sandwiches. Sarah forced herself to smile back. Her face felt like a plastic mask that might break any second. No, thank you. I'm feeling a little dizzy. Probably just tired. I'm going to rest for a bit. Of course. Go lie down. Daniel walked closer and touched her forehead with his palm. His fingers felt warm. The fingers of a jailer. You look pale. Maybe take some medicine. No, I just need to rest. She walked past him into the bedroom, feeling his eyes watching her back. She closed the door and leaned against it, counting to 20. She needed time. She needed him to leave the house. 20 minutes later, Daniel's phone rang. Sarah listened hard. Yes, Mr. Chen. Yes, I understand it's urgent. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Yes, I'm leaving right now. Footsteps in the hall. The jingle of car keys. The heavy sound of the front door closing. The click of the lock. Sarah ran. She flew into the hallway, rushed to the window, and carefully pulled back the curtain. Daniel's red truck was pulling out of the driveway. She waited another minute until the truck disappeared around the corner. Only then did she run to the basement door. The door was locked. A normal wooden door, painted white with a silver handle, but it wouldn't open no matter how hard she pulled. Tommy, she whispered, pressing her ear against the wood. Tommy, can you hear me? It's Sarah, Daniel's wife. Silence. Only the hum of the water heater somewhere in the walls. She ran to the kitchen, grabbed a butter knife, came back and tried to pick the lock. Didn't work. The lock was simple but strong. Then she remembered the video. Daniel hadn't used a key. In the recording, his hands were empty. When he got close to the door, he had done something else. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to remember exactly what she saw on the tablet. Daniel walked up to the door and bent down. Where? Not at the handle. Lower. Toward the floor. She dropped to her knees in front of the door. To the left of the door frame was a metal cover over the heating vent. An old heating vent painted white to match the walls. Sarah slid her fingers through the slots in the metal cover. Cold metal. Paint. Nothing. Think, Sarah, think. You saw this. She pulled the cover toward her. Moved a little with a squeak but didn't come off completely. She pushed harder, sliding it to the side. Then she saw it. In the wall, right behind the heating pipe, was a small hook that was almost impossible to see. A simple metal hook pushed into the plaster and painted the same white color. If you didn't know it was there, you could live in this house forever and never find it. Sarah lifted the hook. There was a dull sound inside the door. The lock opened. She stood up, wiped her sweaty hands on her pants, and turned the handle. The door opened slowly. A smell hit her face. A thick, heavy smell of unwashed clothes, old food, and cigarette smoke. It was the same brand Tommy used to smoke in college when he was studying to be a teacher. That smell was like a time machine, taking her back 10 years in 1 second. Tommy! Sarah stepped into the darkness. Her hand felt around for a light switch. A weak bulb flickered on above her head. The room was narrow and long like a hallway. No windows. Along one wall were metal shelves filled with old paint cans and boxes of nails. In the far corner was a thin mattress covered with a dirty green blanket. Next to it was the tray of half-eaten soup she'd seen in the video. But Tommy wasn't there. "Tommy," she called out. Louder, not caring if anyone heard. The room was empty. The blanket was messy like someone had just jumped up from it. There were cigarette ends on the floor but no person. It was a dead end. 4 walls. 1 door. Where could he have gone? Sarah searched the tiny space frantically. She looked behind the shelves and threw aside empty boxes. Nobody. He couldn't have just vanished into thin air. Then her eyes caught something on the floor near the mattress. A small piece of plastic was shining in the dust. Sarah bent down and picked it up. It was an ID card. A hospital ID card for Mercy General Hospital. She recognized it because she had one just like it in her purse. She'd gotten it last week for her checkup. She turned the plastic card over. It said Carter Sarah. Her name, her last name, her birthday. But the photo wasn't hers. Staring back from the small square was the face of Mrs. Patterson. Her hair was cut very short and her eyes looked wild and scared. Sarah felt the floor disappear under her feet. She looked at the blood type line on the card. It said, O negative. Sarah was A positive. Mrs. Patterson was B positive. O negative had been Tommy's blood type. It was like a sick puzzle. Her name, Mrs. Patterson's face, Tommy's blood, and the hospital's official stamp dated 2 days ago. Would Daniel need a fake ID with her name but with his dead brother's information and the old lady's photo? Sarah squeezed the plastic card in her hand until the edges hurt her skin. This wasn't just a prison cell. This was preparation for something much worse. Tommy wasn't just being hidden here. Daniel was building a new identity or using Tommy as some kind of replacement for someone. In the quiet of the basement, a strange sound suddenly echoed through the air. A dull thumping noise. Not from upstairs. Not from outside. The sound was coming from inside the wall where the mattress was lying. Lump, 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 lump. Sarah froze completely still. She knew that rhythm. When they were kids, she and Tommy used to knock on walls like that when their parents separated them for fighting. 3 shorts, 1 long. I'm here. I can hear you. He wasn't in the room. He was somewhere deeper. Hidden in the bones of this terrible house. Sarah pressed her ear against the cold wall. The knocking happened again, muffled like it was coming from underground. She pulled the mattress away from the wall. Under it was a normal wood floor, but one of the boards was slightly different from the others. It was held down by new shiny nails that looked out of place. Sarah used her butter knife to pry up the edge. The blade bent but the board moved. It wasn't a regular board. It was a door disguised as part of the floor. The smell of wetness, mold, and old pipes hit her nose. Below was darkness, a crawl space between the floors of the house. "Tommy," she whispered into the dark hole. No answer. Only a scratching sound. Someone was crawling down there in a space barely big enough for a dog. Sarah didn't stop to think. She put down the knife, pulled her knees up to her chest, and slid into the hole feet first. The walls pressed against her from all sides. It was so narrow she could barely move. Dust filled her nose and mouth. Spider webs stuck to her face and hair. She crawled forward on her elbows, scraping her arms on the rough concrete, following the sound of heavy breathing ahead of her. These were the service tunnels under the old house. The hidden spaces people whispered about in scary stories. They said you could travel under the whole neighborhood through them without ever going outside. Now she knew it was true. "Stop!" she shouted, choking on dust. "Tommy, stop moving." "It's me, Sarah." Something banged against a pipe up ahead. The light from the basement above barely reached down here, but Sarah could see a shape. A man was curled up in a ball where the water pipes met the wall. He was shaking all over. Sarah crawled closer on her belly. Now she could see his face clearly. It was him, but at the same time it wasn't him at all. Years in the dark had turned a handsome young teacher into an old broken man. His skin was pale and gray, almost see-through. His eyes looked wild and scared. His hair was long and tangled like a bird's nest. He saw her coming and pressed himself harder into the wall, covering his head with his hands like a little child expecting to be hit. "Please don't," he whimpered. His voice was rough and barely sounded human. "I didn't do anything wrong. I was quiet. Please don't hurt me. Tommy, it's me. It's Sarah, Daniel's wife." She reached out her hand, but he kicked at her, trying to push her away. "Go away. You're one of them. He sent you. You told him I wasn't useful anymore." Sarah stopped moving. The pain from his kick on her shoulder was nothing compared to the pain his words caused. "What are you talking about? I thought you were dead. We had a funeral. We buried you 10 years ago." Tommy suddenly went completely still. He lowered his hands slowly and looked at her. In his eyes was a mix of animal fear and disbelief that anyone could be so fooled. "Buried me?" he asked. "Yeah, you people put on a great show. Very nice acting. Daniel showed me the pictures. You in the black dress, crying at my grave. Very believable. He said it was your idea. Your wife is tired of your problems, Tommy. She wants a quiet life. She needs the house money, not a sick brother-in-law." "I never," Sarah felt sick to her stomach. "Daniel told me you died from your injuries in the hospital. I paid all your medical bills, Tommy. We sold the family cabin to clear the debts you owed to Blue Ridge Credit Company." When she said Blue Ridge Credit Company, Tommy made a sound like a crazy laugh. The sound bounced off the metal pipes around them. "Blue Ridge Credit Company," he repeated. "Sarah, you're so smart. You run an art gallery. You sell paintings to rich people. And you never checked. Not even once." He crawled closer to her. His breath smelled terrible. "There is no Blue Ridge Credit Company. It was a fake business. The owner was just some random guy Daniel paid, but the real person behind it." He pointed a dirty finger up at the ceiling toward their house. "Your husband. He lent me the money himself using fake names. He gave me loans knowing I could never pay them back. He dug this trap, Sarah. All to take everything. The cabin, Dad's tools, your share of the inheritance money, and me." Sarah sat in the dirt, cold sweat running down her spine. The puzzle pieces were coming together in her mind. Horrible, bloody puzzle. Daniel wasn't a hero who saved his brother. He was like a spider who had been spinning this web for years, waiting to trap everyone. "But why keep you here?" she whispered. "If he took everything already, why keep you alive in this hole?" Tommy looked at her with sudden, chilling clearness in his eyes. The craziness went away for a moment, replaced by ice-cold despair. "Because I'm not just someone who owes him money. I'm a witness. And I'm the star of his movie." He pulled a small USB drive from his dirty clothes. It was hanging on a string around his neck. 10 years ago in that basement he brought people with him. They beat me up really bad. Then one of them gave me a shot that made me stop breathing. I could hear everything around me, but I couldn't move at all. They put me in a black bag. Daniel filmed the whole thing. He filmed my face looking dead. He filmed the doctor saying I was gone. And then later he showed me that video. Tommy shook, and tears made clean lines down his dirty face. He said, "See, Tommy, you're officially dead. If you ever show your face outside, if you ever try to contact Sarah or anyone else, I'll send this video to the police. Not as proof that I did something wrong, but as proof that you faked your own death to run away from the people you owed money to. Insurance fraud. Tax evasion. You'll go to prison for 15 years. And in prison, I'll make sure you never come out alive." Sarah looked at her brother-in-law and understood. Daniel had created the perfect trap. A dead man can't go to the police. A dead man has no rights. He only exists as long as he's useful to the person keeping him. "He's blackmailing you with your own death," she whispered. Not just me, Tommy said, looking into her eyes. He said if I tried to escape, he would lock you up too. He'd say you were part of the plan. You were the one who signed the hospital papers saying I was dead. Your signature is on the police report. You confirmed the lie, Sarah. On paper, you're part of the crime. At that exact moment, the front door of the house slammed shut above their heads. Heavy, confident footsteps walked across the wooden floor, right over where they were hiding. Daniel was back early from the construction site. Quiet, Tommy mouthed silently, pressing back into the pipe corner. He hears everything. He always hears. Sarah, honey. I brought home those chocolate cookies you love. Where are you? You're not in the bedroom. His voice sounded calm and loving. The kind of voice that made Sarah's blood turn to ice water. He was walking toward the basement door. Sarah froze, too scared to even breathe. The dust in her throat made her want to cough, but she bit her lip so hard it started bleeding. The floorboards squeaked right above the hidden door. Daniel was standing directly over them. Sarah! His voice was muffled, but she could hear him clearly. No alarm in his voice yet. Just mild confusion. That's strange. The basement door is open but nobody's down here. He took one step, then another. The sound of his footsteps faded as he left the basement. Sarah looked at Tommy. He was hugging his knees, shaking like a leaf in the wind. His eyes were begging her silently. Go. Get out. She nodded, promising without words that she would come back for him, and crawled back toward the light. Getting out was much harder than getting in. Her arms felt weak and her hands kept slipping on the concrete. She pulled herself up through the hole and quickly closed the floor hatch, putting the board back in place. The mattress went back on top. The boxes were moved to look like before. She barely had time to brush the dust off her pants and slip into the hallway before Daniel appeared from the kitchen. He was holding a box of cookies. Ah, there you are, he smiled, but his eyes stayed cold as ice, looking her up and down carefully. I thought you were playing hide and seek with me. Where were you? I called your name. Sarah leaned against the wall because her legs were shaking so badly. Her heart was beating so hard she thought it would jump out of her chest. I was in the bathroom, she lied. The water was running. I didn't hear you calling. Daniel stepped closer. He looked at her face, then moved his eyes down to her hands. Dirty hands, dusty hands, scratched hands. Then to her pants, which had white dust stains on the knees. His smile changed, became soft and sympathetic. A tender smile that made her want to scream. Sarah, sweetheart, he said, setting the cookie box on the hall table. He took her wrist gently and lifted her dirty palms up to the light. Look at you. You're shaking. And all this mess. You were looking through those old photo albums again, weren't you? What? Sarah was caught off guard by the accusation. No, I just dropped my earring behind the dresser. I had to crawl around to find it. Shoo. He pressed a finger softly to her lips. Don't make excuses, honey. Understand. Moving is very stressful. And this neighborhood, all the memories of Tommy. It probably feels like the past is coming back to haunt you, doesn't it? He spoke in a quiet, hypnotic tone, like a doctor talking to a confused patient. I've noticed you haven't been yourself lately. Forgetting things. Getting dates mixed up. Like right now you're talking about your earring, but you're wearing both of them. Sarah looked at her ears. Her earrings were indeed both there. She had told the first lie that popped into her head, and he had caught her in it immediately. Daniel, I'm not losing my mind, she snapped, pulling her hand away from his grip. I'm just tired from unpacking. Of course you're tired. You're working too hard. Maybe even getting a little paranoid from all the stress. You need to lie down and rest. I'll call a doctor to come give you something to help you. Sleep. I don't need a doctor, she yelled, backing away from him. I just need some space to breathe. At that very moment, there was a sharp knock at the back door. The one that led to the alley behind the house. 3 quick raps on the wood. Daniel's face changed. The mask of the caring husband cracked just for a second, showing anger underneath. "Who could that be?" he muttered under his breath. "I'm not expecting anyone. Go to the bedroom, Sarah. I'll handle whoever it is." But Sarah didn't move. She recognized that knock. Only one person knocked like that, quick and impatient. "No, I'll get it," she said firmly. And before her husband could stop her, she threw open the lock and pulled the door wide. Mrs. Patterson stood there on the doorstep. She looked even worse than she had in the park. Her face was gray and pale. Her lips looked like she'd been biting them. In her hands, she held a thick manila folder stuffed with papers. "Helen!" Daniel froze in the doorway of the living room. His voice turned to ice. "What are you doing here? We had an agreement. The sale is final. You got your money. You were supposed to leave town and never come back." "The money's gone, Daniel," Mrs. Patterson said in a raspy voice, pushing her way into the hall. She didn't even look at Sarah. Her eyes were locked on Daniel like a laser beam. "Your little payment for a bus ticket to Florida. It's a joke. I need more money. A lot more." "Are you drunk?" Daniel stepped toward her, clearly planning to throw her out physically. "Get out of my house before I call the police." "Call them," Mrs. Patterson shrieked. "Call the police. Call anyone you want. Let everyone know you have a dead man living in your basement like a rat in a cage." Daniel stopped moving. He shot a quick glance at Sarah. His eyes flickered with thoughts and calculations. "Sarah, go to the other room," he ordered in a harsh voice. "Helen's having some kind of breakdown. She just wants money for alcohol. Don't listen to this crazy nonsense." "Nonsense." Mrs. Patterson laughed. It was a terrible barking laugh that didn't sound human. "Sarah already knows Daniel. She saw the video. I showed her everything." Silence fell over the hallway. A thick, heavy silence where the only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall. Daniel slowly turned his head toward his wife. There was no care or warmth left in his eyes. Only a cold, empty darkness. "You saw it?" he asked quietly, like he was asking about the weather. Sarah backed up against the wall, feeling trapped like a mouse in a corner. "Yes," she breathed out. "I saw Tommy. I know what you did to him. You're evil, Daniel. You're a monster." Daniel laughed. It wasn't a nice laugh. He relaxed his shoulders and put his hands in his pockets like the situation had stopped being dangerous and was just annoying now. Monster. Such a big dramatic word for something so simple. "I'm a businessman, Sarah. I solve problems. Your brother-in-law was a problem. A huge, expensive problem that was dragging us both down. I solved it for us. For our family. For our future." "You kept him in a cage for 10 years like an animal," Sarah said, feeling anger push out her fear. "I kept him safe," Daniel barked. It was the first time he had raised his voice. If he had gone out on the street, the real loan sharks would have killed him. Or he would have died in some gutter from drinking too much. "I gave him a roof over his head. I gave him food. I gave him a life. Yeah, it's a rat's life, but it's still a life. Better than being dead in the ground." "You stole everything from him." Sarah felt her hands ball into fists. "You destroyed him." "Me." Daniel laughed again. "And who signed all the legal papers? Who transferred the money from the bank accounts?" He gestured toward Mrs. Patterson. "Show her, Helen. Let our innocent Sarah see how clean her own hands really are." With shaking hands, Mrs. Patterson opened the manila folder and pulled out a sheet of paper. It was a bank statement with an official seal and stamps. "This is the statement for the account that was used to maintain the situation," Mrs. Patterson said quietly, handing the paper to Sarah. "The account is in the name of a cleaning service that supposedly took care of Tommy. In reality, it's Daniel's secret offshore account." Sarah took the paper. The letters seemed to jump and dance before her eyes, but she forced herself to focus and read carefully. Sender: Carter Sarah. Payment purpose: charitable donation to Helping Hands Foundation. Amount: $600. Frequency, monthly starting September 10 years ago. What is this? Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. I never sent this money. I didn't do this. You did, Daniel said softly, almost gently. Remember that charity I suggested you donate to years ago? Second Chances Foundation. You signed up for automatic payments. You thought you were helping homeless people get back on their feet. But really, you were paying for your brother-in-law's prison. The food. The electricity. Helen's silence. All of it. Sarah stared at the paper as her entire world fell apart around her like a building collapsing. You made me part of this, she said, her voice not even sounding like her own anymore. You made me pay for my own brother-in-law's prison. You made me the criminal. Yes. Daniel nodded like he was proud of himself. To any investigator who looks at this, it looks like this. A wife who wants to get rid of her husband's troublesome brother. She hires someone to fake his death and hide him. Then she pays for 10 years to keep him locked away. The motive is clear. She wanted the inheritance money. The method is clear. The evidence is right there with your electronic signature on it. He walked right up to her and leaned down to whisper in her ear. We're in the same boat now, Sarah. If I go to prison, you go to prison with me. You're the one who paid for it all. And the person who pays for a crime gets more jail time than the person who does the crime. That's how the law works. Mrs. Patterson stood by the door, clutching her empty folder to her chest. I need money, Daniel, she repeated in a dull, lifeless voice. Or I'm going to the police. I have nothing left to lose anymore. Daniel looked at her with disgust in his eyes. Fine. You'll get your money. But first, Sarah and I need to have a private discussion about our options. He placed a heavy hand on Sarah's shoulder. Possessive, controlling hand. We have a choice here, Sarah. Either we go to the police right now, and we both go to prison for the next 20 years. Or we sit down, have some tea, calm down, and decide how to live with our little family secret going forward. Sarah looked at the bank statement in her hand. Her signature. Her money. Her prison. She slowly lifted her head to look at him. Something inside her brain clicked and shifted like a gear moving into place. The fear that had been paralyzing her vanished completely. It was replaced by an icy, crystal-clear calmness. Daniel thought he had trapped her in a corner. He thought she would break down under the weight of guilt, even guilt that was manufactured and fake. He didn't know one important thing about Sarah Carter. She had run an art gallery for 15 years, dealing with the smartest and trickiest people in the city. She knew how to smile sweetly while holding a weapon behind her back. Okay, she said, her voice surprisingly calm and steady. You're right, Daniel. We don't need the police involved in this mess. We don't need a scandal. I care too much about my reputation to let this become public knowledge. Daniel blinked in surprise. He had expected tears, screaming, or denial. Not agreement. You understand. He loosened his grip on her shoulder slightly. I understand perfectly, Sarah said. We're tied together now. We're partners in this. She neatly folded the bank statement and set it on the hall table. Helen, wait in the kitchen. My husband and I need to talk privately. Mrs. Patterson, looking confused and nervous, shuffled into the kitchen and closed the door. Sarah walked into the living room and sat down in an armchair. She pointed to the sofa across from her. Sit down, Daniel. We need to agree on the rules going forward. Daniel sat down carefully, still watching her with suspicion. What rules? We just keep living our lives, Sarah. Take care of Tommy like I've been doing all these years. Helen gets her money and leaves town. Everything stays exactly the same as before. No, Sarah shook her head firmly. It can't stay the same. I can't live in this house knowing my brother-in-law is suffering behind that wall. But I also know that letting him out right now means prison for both of us. She paused, letting him take the bait. I want guarantees, Daniel. Insurance. You're too smart and too cunning for me to trust completely. Today we're partners, but tomorrow you might decide I'm a problem that needs to be solved. I need protection. What kind of protection? Daniel asked. This house and the lake cottage, she said. You'll transfer both property titles into my name only. Right now. Today. Daniel laughed out loud. Are you joking? That's worth almost $2 million, Sarah. And what is your freedom worth to you? She leaned forward in her chair. Or do you think I won't risk going to the police myself? I can play the victim, Daniel. The poor woman who was tricked and manipulated by her controlling husband into financing a kidnapping without knowing what she was really doing. The jury will love that story. But you, as the mastermind behind everything, you won't be able to wiggle out of it so easily. Daniel stopped laughing. Sarah could see the wheels turning in his head as he weighed the risks and calculated the odds. Fine, he finally said after a long silence. If that's the price for your peace of mind and your silence, then take it. But we do this quietly, without involving your lawyers who ask too many questions. I have a notary friend who works on weekends and doesn't ask any questions at all. Deal, Sarah nodded. She carefully touched the pocket of her jeans. Her phone was there, and the voice recorder app had been running since she heard Mrs. Patterson's voice at the door. She'd turned it on secretly in the hallway. But before we go to sign papers, she said softly, tell me the real truth, just for me. Why did you really do all this? It wasn't just about the money. I know you well enough. There was something personal behind it. Daniel rubbed his face with both hands. He looked tired. The stress of the last few hours had finally caught up to him. He relaxed, believing the crisis had passed and his wife was back on his side, loyal and obedient. Because he was always the favorite son, Daniel said in a hollow, empty voice. Tommy the smart one. Tommy the teacher. Tommy the one who made Mom and Dad so proud. And who was I? Just Daniel. The construction worker. The one who fixed things. I wanted to show my father that I could build an empire bigger and better than anything Tommy could ever create with his fancy college degree. I wanted Tommy to depend completely on me. To be nothing without me. To know that I was the one in control. And I succeeded at that. You created a living hell just so you could feel like a god, Sarah said, her voice flat and emotionless. I created order out of chaos, Daniel snapped back at her. That's enough talking. Get your purse. We're going to the notary office right now. 1 hour later, they were sitting in a small office in a strip mall across town. The sign outside said Riverside Notary Services, and looked official enough to be real. Inside it smelled like coffee and old paper. Behind a big wooden desk sat a man in an expensive gray suit and gold-rimmed glasses. He introduced himself as Victor Chen. Sarah felt her hands shaking under the table, but she kept them still and calm-looking. The voice recorder in her pocket was her secret weapon. But right now she needed the paper. The document that would make her the legal owner and give her power over the situation. Victor handed her a stack of papers clipped together. Property transfer deed, he explained in a bored, official-sounding voice. The house at 47 Maple Street and the cottage at Crystal Lake. Full transfer of ownership to Sarah Ellen Carter. Review the documents carefully and sign at the bottom of each page. Sarah scanned the text quickly. The legal language was complicated and hard to understand, but the basic meaning was clear as day. Daniel was voluntarily giving her everything he owned. She looked at her husband sitting next to her. He was calm, almost bored-looking. He signed his copy of the papers without even reading them. Your turn, he said, handing her a pen. Sarah took the pen in her hand. At that moment, she felt an incredible wave of relief wash over her. This was victory. Messy and complicated, but still a victory. With these documents, she could kick Daniel out of the house. She could hire the best lawyers in the state to help Tommy. She could fix everything that had gone wrong. She signed her name in large, clear letters at the bottom of the first page. Then she signed the property transfer form. Then the notary's official ledger book. Congratulations, Victor said, stamping each paper with a loud thud of his official seal. The transaction is complete and legally binding. Sarah let out a long breath she didn't know she'd been holding. She hugged the folder of documents tightly to her chest like it was a shield protecting her. "Can we go home now?" she asked. "Of course," Daniel smiled at her. "Let's go home." They walked out into the parking lot. The autumn air felt sweeter and cleaner than it had in days. Sarah felt like she had done it. She had outplayed him at his own game. Daniel opened the car door for her like a gentleman. "You know," he said casually as they drove away from the strip mall, "I'm almost glad everything happened this way. No more secrets between us now. We're true partners. Equal partners." Sarah didn't answer him. She just looked out the window at the passing trees, clutching the folder of documents. She didn't notice Daniel typing a quick text message on his phone with one hand while he drove. She didn't see him hit send. Back at the notary office, Victor took off his gold-rimmed glasses and unbuttoned his collar. He pulled a bottle of cheap whiskey from his desk drawer and poured himself a shot. The door to the back room opened and a young woman in jeans and a t-shirt walked out, counting a stack of $20 bills. "So, Uncle Vic, did she actually fall for it?" she asked. "Hook, line, and sinker," Victor chuckled, downing his shot. "She signed everything without looking carefully at the fine print. Didn't even notice that page 3 was completely different from the sample we showed her." He picked up the document Sarah had just signed. It wasn't a property transfer deed at all. The heading at the top of page 3 read, "Sworn Confession and Statement of Guilt." The text began, "I, Sarah Ellen Carter, being of sound mind and body, do hereby confess that for 10 years I have illegally held Thomas William Carter in an isolated room for the purpose of hiding him from creditors and stealing family inheritance money for my own benefit." And beneath that confession on page 4 was another document. A general power of attorney giving Daniel complete control over all of Sarah's assets, including her art gallery, her bank accounts, and both properties. Victor's niece laughed as she finished counting the money Daniel had paid them. "Uncle Vic, Daniel is an evil genius. I almost feel bad for that poor woman." "Don't feel too bad," Vic said, pouring another shot. "She's about to learn a very expensive lesson about reading before you sign." Meanwhile, Sarah sat in the car, clutching her folder. She was thinking about how she would get home, march straight down to that basement, unlock the door, and tell Tommy he was finally free. She didn't know the trap had just slammed shut around her neck like a noose. Daniel's truck pulled up to the curb in front of their house on Maple Street. Sarah didn't wait for him to come around and open her door. She jumped out onto the sidewalk, holding the folder tight. "I'm going to Tommy right now," she said over her shoulder. "You have 2 hours to pack your things and get out of my house." Daniel didn't say anything. He just smiled that strange smile and pressed a button on his keyring, locking all the car doors with a beep. Sarah ran up the front steps of the porch and pushed open the heavy front door. She ran straight into the wide chest of a security guard. It wasn't their regular neighborhood patrol officer. This was a stranger. A huge mountain of a man dressed in a black uniform with no name tag or badge. Beside him stood a second guard, just as big and stone-faced. "Excuse me, I live here," Sarah said, trying to step around. But one guard moved to block her path. "Unauthorized persons are not allowed to enter," he said in a flat, robotic voice. "Unauthorized." Sarah gasped for air. "I own this house. Here are the legal documents proving it." She frantically opened the folder to pull out the deed and shove it in his face. "Ma'am, please don't make a scene and disturb the neighbors," the second guard said, putting a heavy hand on her shoulder and turning her back toward the street. "We have direct orders from the property owner. No unauthorized or unstable persons are allowed inside." "What owner?" "I am the owner," Sarah shouted. "Daniel!" She turned, looking for her husband, who was just coming up the front steps slowly. "Daniel, tell these men. What is this crazy circus?" Daniel stopped on the top step of the porch. His face was the picture of deep, sincere sadness and concern. He looked at Sarah with so much pity that her blood ran cold in her veins. "Sarah, honey," he said softly, like he was talking to a sick child. Please don't make a scene in front of all the neighbors. You're only making things worse for yourself. The doctors will be here very soon to help you." "What doctors? What are you talking about?" Sarah backed away from him. "We were just at the notary. You signed over the house to me." People were starting to gather on the sidewalk now. Neighbors from up and down Maple Street. Curious old ladies. Young moms with baby strollers. The whole street seemed to be watching. Daniel sighed deeply and turned to address the growing crowd. "Please forgive us, everyone," he said loudly, his voice full of fake emotion and concern. "My wife Sarah, she's having a mental breakdown from stress. Move. The memories. She's starting to have delusions and hear voices. She thinks her dead brother-in-law is alive and living in our house." A whisper rippled through the crowd of neighbors like a wave. "Oh, poor Sarah. She always was a little fragile after the funeral. Grief can do terrible things to a person's mind." "That's a lie," Sarah screamed, feeling panic start to choke her. "He's lying to all of you. Tommy is alive. Daniel has been keeping him prisoner in the basement. I saw him with my own eyes. I have proof." She yanked the papers from the folder and shoved them under the nearest guard's nose. "Look, the property deed. It proves I'm telling the truth." The guard glanced at the paper for half a second and then smirked. "A deed? Lady, can you even read? This isn't a deed." Sarah looked down at the page in her shaking hands. The letters jumped and swam before her eyes, but she could see the header clearly now. Sworn confession and statement of guilt. The world tilted sideways. She flipped frantically to the next page. General power of attorney. Then the next page. Property transfer. To Daniel Carter. Everything was signed in her own handwriting. Every single page. "No," she whispered. "No, this can't be right." The papers were switched somehow. Victor. The notary Victor, he witnessed the real papers. He stamped them. "Victor witnessed what you actually signed, Sarah," Daniel said sadly, like he was explaining something to a confused child. He took the folder gently from her trembling hands. "You confessed to hiding a homeless drifter in our basement and pretending he was Tommy because you couldn't accept that Tommy was really gone. You've lost touch with reality, dear. You're mentally ill." He turned to the security guards with a heavy sigh. "Gentlemen, please remove that man from the basement immediately. Take him to the county hospital and let the police figure out who he really is. And my wife, don't let her back into the house. She's a danger to herself and others right now." The front door of the house opened wide and 2 more guards came out, dragging Tommy between them by his arms. He looked absolutely terrible. Filthy, wild-haired, blinking and squinting in the bright sunlight he hadn't seen in 10 years. He moaned and tried to pull free, but he was too weak to fight them. "Tommy!" Sarah screamed at the top of her lungs, trying to run to him. A guard caught her around the waist and held her back. "It's him. It's Tommy Carter. Look at him. You people must remember him. He used to teach at the elementary school." The crowd of neighbors pulled back in. Fear and disgust. They didn't see the brilliant young teacher they remembered from years ago. They saw a crazy, broken man in rags who was drooling and rolling his eyes in pure terror. "Oh my God, how awful," whispered an old woman from number 52. Sarah's really lost her mind completely. Bringing a homeless person into her house and calling him Tommy. How sad. "It is Tommy," Sarah shrieked, struggling against the guard's iron grip. "Daniel, what are you doing? How can you do this to your own brother?" Daniel walked up to Tommy slowly. He didn't look at him like a brother. He looked at him like a piece of garbage finally being taken to the dump. "Take him away," Daniel said shortly to the guards. "Drop him at the state mental hospital as a John Doe patient. He doesn't have any identification on him." "He does have ID," Sarah suddenly remembered. "He has my hospital card, with Mrs. Patterson's photo on it. Check his pockets." But Daniel wasn't listening to her anymore. He turned back to face Sarah directly. And you, my dear wife, you have nothing left now. The house is mine through the legal deed you signed in your confused state. The lake cottage is mine. Your art gallery is mine through the power of attorney you gave me. You're a danger to society, Sarah. You need professional help. You wouldn't dare, she said, her voice coming out as barely a whisper. I'll go to the police. I have proof. I recorded everything you said. She reached into her pocket for her phone. Me. Her pocket was completely empty. Sarah went ice cold all over. She remembered Daniel hugging her outside the notary's office, saying something sweet and adjusting her jacket. The caring, loving husband. Daniel pulled her phone out of his own jacket pocket now. He held it up and twirled it in his fingers, showing her the screen. Looking for this, sweetheart. He pressed a button and Sarah heard the horrible sound of a file being permanently deleted. Oops. Poor Sarah. Always losing your things. Losing your mind. Get out of here, he said quietly, leaning down close to her face. Get out before I have you actually committed to the state asylum for real. Go live on the streets like the homeless man you tried to pass off as my brother. See what that feels like. The guard gave Sarah a hard shove in the back. She lost her balance and fell forward onto her knees on the concrete sidewalk. Her pants ripped. Her palms started bleeding from scraping the rough ground. She lifted her head slowly. Daniel stood on the porch above her like a king looking down at a beggar. Beside him, appearing from nowhere like a ghost, stood Mrs. Patterson. The old woman no longer looked scared or worried. She looked at Sarah with a triumphant, evil smirk on her wrinkled face. Oh, and we packed up all your personal junk, Mrs. Patterson announced loudly for all the neighbors to hear. Can't have a crazy woman's trash cluttering up a nice respectable house like this. She pointed toward the street. There, parked at the curb, sat Mrs. Patterson's beat-up old station wagon. The trunk was standing open. The back seat was piled high with familiar shapes. Sarah's sewing machine, the one her grandmother had given her. Rolls of expensive silk fabric she'd been saving for years for her masterpiece collection. Her design sketches and patterns. Her dress mannequins. Her whole life, her art, her skills, her past. Everything was dumped in a pile like garbage ready for the trash truck. Take your junk and get lost, Mrs. Patterson yelled shrilly. Or I'm dumping it all in the garbage bin right now. You have 5 minutes. Sarah sat on the cold concrete. All around her, neighbors were whispering and gossiping about crazy Mrs. Carter, who had finally lost her mind completely. Tommy was being shoved into a black van with no license plates. Daniel was putting his arm around Mrs. Patterson's waist, accepting sympathy and support from the building manager. No home, no family, no evidence, no proof, no identity, only scraped knees and the taste of blood in her mouth from biting her lip. She tried to stand up, but her legs felt like they were made of water and wouldn't hold her weight. The world hadn't ended when she first saw the video. It ended now, at this moment, when she realized that all this time, she hadn't been fighting against her husband. She had been fighting against a system he had built specifically to trap her. And in that system, she had been assigned the role of the neighborhood crazy lady. Sarah pushed herself up from the concrete, ignoring the burning pain in her scraped knees. The neighbors were still buzzing with gossip, but no one came close to help her. She was a pariah now, an outcast. The black van carrying Tommy had already disappeared around the corner of Maple Street. She didn't know where they were taking him, but she knew one thing for absolutely certain. If she stayed here and gave up, the next van would be coming for her. Her eyes darted up to the second-floor windows of the house next door. Behind the lace curtains lived Judge Margaret Holloway, retired. The most respected woman in the neighborhood. A former family court judge whose word carried weight like gold. Even Daniel, with all his arrogance and schemes, had always been respectful and polite to Judge Holloway. He called her Your Honor and brought her flowers on her birthday. Judge Holloway knew everyone on this street. Judge Holloway remembered everything about everyone. And Judge Holloway had always told Sarah that she reminded her of her own daughter who had passed away young. Sarah grabbed her purse from where it had fallen and, ducking behind the rose bushes, ran to the side entrance of Judge Holloway's house. The gate was unlocked. In these old neighborhoods, people often forgot to lock their gates during the day. Sarah flew up the steps to the side porch. Her heart felt like it was going to explode. She rang the doorbell. 3 short rings, 1 long ring. Their old secret signal from years ago when Sarah used to babysit the judge's grandchildren. The door opened almost immediately. Judge Holloway stood there, tall and dignified even in her casual clothes. She still had that commanding presence that made people tell the truth. "Sarah, my dear child, what on earth is this appearance?" The judge's sharp eyes took in Sarah's torn pants, bloody hands, and terrified face. "I saw some kind of commotion from my window. What's happening?" "Judge Holloway, please let me inside," Sarah gasped, stumbling through the doorway and slamming it shut behind her. "Daniel has gone insane. He's framing me for crimes I didn't commit. He's trying to have me locked up in a mental institution." Judge Holloway didn't waste time with unnecessary questions. She saw the blood and the wild look of genuine terror in Sarah's eyes. "Calm yourself. Breathe deeply," the judge said, taking Sarah's arm firmly. "You need water and a moment to collect your thoughts." Judge Holloway's house was like stepping back in time. Antique furniture everywhere. Law books lining the walls. The smell of old leather and lemon furniture polish. "Hide me," Sarah whispered urgently. "He'll come looking for me. He knows I won't leave without my things and without Tommy." "Of course I'll hide you," Judge Holloway nodded with certainty. "Come to my study. There's a small storage closet in there. No one knows about it except me. It's not even shown on the modern house plans. I'll lock the door from the outside for extra security. If anyone comes asking questions, I'll say I haven't seen you." "Thank you, Your Honor," Sarah said, feeling tears of gratitude filling her eyes. "You're the only person I can trust right now." The door of the study closet closed. The lock clicked into place. Sarah was left in semi-darkness among boxes of old legal files and stacks of law journals. She slumped down onto the floor with her head in her hands. She had to think clearly now. "Tommy. Where is Tommy? How do I find him? How do I prove Daniel is lying about everything?" Her eyes fell on an old metal filing cabinet in the corner of the small closet. It was covered with papers, receipts, and record books. Sarah reached for one mechanically, just to keep her hands busy and her mind focused. It was an old ledger book, worn and stained. Judge Holloway had always kept detailed personal records, even after retiring from the bench. Sarah opened it randomly to the middle. Columns of numbers. Names of people. Suddenly, one name jumped out at her like it was written in fire. Carter D. Sarah looked closer at the entry. Next to Daniel's name were dollar amounts. Large amounts of money. But these weren't payments Daniel had made to the judge. They were payments going the other way. Disbursements from Daniel to Judge Holloway. New roof installation, Holloway residence. Paid by Carter D. $28,000. Foundation repair, paid by Carter. $15,000. Monthly medical insurance premiums, Holloway, paid by Carter. $900 per month. A chill ran down Sarah's spine like ice water. 4 years, Daniel had been paying for the judge's comfort and expenses. Her new roof. Her expensive medications. The repairs to her aging house. Why would Daniel, who was so cheap he would argue over a $5 coffee, support a retired judge financially? Sarah flipped back to the beginning of the ledger. September 10 years ago. The month Tommy died. An entry from September 18th, just 5 days after the funeral. Received from Carter D. $12,000. Purpose. Legal consultation fee. No questions asked. And below that, in Judge Holloway's neat handwriting, witness statement provided as requested. Death certificate witness signature given. No further investigation needed. The book fell from Sarah's hands and hit the floor with a thud. She remembered that day now. The meeting where Tommy's debts and death were discussed officially. Daniel had said Tommy was dead and showed the death certificate. But the police needed witnesses to confirm they had seen the body. And Judge Holloway, respected Judge Margaret Holloway, had stood up in her formal voice and said, "I saw it with my own eyes. The poor young man. The ambulance took him away in the night. Such a tragedy." Her word had been law. Everyone had believed her testimony without question. The police hadn't even bothered questioning other neighbors, satisfied with the statement from the honorable retired judge. She had sold Tommy out. Sold him for house repairs and medical insurance payments. Footsteps sounded outside the study door. Not the slow, careful steps of an old woman. Quick, purposeful steps. Then Judge Holloway's voice. But not the kind, grandmotherly tone she had used 5 minutes ago. This was a cold, businesslike voice. "Yes, Daniel, I have her. She ran right to me like a scared rabbit. I locked her in the back storage closet. She's quiet for now. I told her I'd bring her tea and cookies." A pause while Daniel said something on the other end of the phone. "No, she's being very quiet and obedient. She trusts me completely, the foolish girl." Another pause. "Of course, call them. Use that private ambulance service, the one that doesn't ask questions and uses sedatives. Have them come to my back gate. I'll unlock it for them." Longer pause. "Now Daniel, you remember our agreement, don't you? My garage needs to be completely rebuilt. That's going to be very expensive. At least $40,000. Sarah covered her mouth with both hands to stop herself from screaming out loud. The betrayal was total and complete. There was no honorable retired judge preserving justice and truth. There was just another vulture Daniel had been feeding for years with money. And now they were all waiting together to pick her bones clean. "Agreed, Your Honor." Daniel's voice came faintly through the phone. "I'll see you in 15 minutes with the ambulance." The footsteps faded away down the hall. Sarah was left alone in the dark closet. She had 15 minutes. 15 minutes before the men in white coats arrived to take her somewhere that people don't come back from. She looked desperately at the tiny window near the ceiling of the closet. It led to some kind of air shaft, narrow and covered in spider webs. But it was the only way out. The only escape route. She stood up on the filing cabinet, stepping right on top of that cursed ledger book. If she wanted to survive this nightmare, she couldn't keep being the victim. She had to become the rat who knew this neighborhood better than the people who thought they owned it. Sarah pushed against the window frame with all her strength. The old paint cracked and peeled. The window groaned and creaked but finally swung open. The smell of damp basement air and pigeon droppings hit her in the face. She didn't care. She pulled herself up, the sharp metal edge of the window frame digging painfully into her ribs, and squeezed her body through the narrow opening. The air shaft led down at an angle to the basement level. Sarah half slid, half fell down the metal chute, scraping her elbows and banging her knees, until she landed with a painful thud on a pile of old drop cloths in the furnace room. She stood up and brushed herself off as best she could. The darkness down here wasn't an enemy anymore. It was her friend and protector. She knew these basements like the back of her hand. She and Tommy had explored every inch of them as kids, playing pirates and treasure hunters. Now the game was real and deadly. She felt her way through the maze of pipes and support beams until she found the exit into the alley behind the houses. From there, it was just a short run to the back door of her art gallery. It was the one place Daniel hadn't managed to reach yet. He had always dismissed her business as woman's hobby stuff, and never bothered to get keys or access. 15 minutes later, she was inside her gallery. The familiar smell of oil paint, turpentine, and canvas was like coming home. Here, surrounded by her artwork and her tools, she felt safe for the first time in days. Sarah turned on the small desk lamp in her office and pulled the heavy curtains shut to block the windows. First things first, she grabbed the first aid kit from under her desk. She cleaned the cuts and scrapes on her hands and knees. The sharp sting of the antiseptic was grounding. It reminded her she was still alive and still fighting. "Stop running away," she told her reflection in the dark window. "Stop being the victim they want you to be. You know this neighborhood better than Daniel does. Know these people better than he does. Daniel bought their loyalty with money, but he doesn't know their secrets and their fears." She sat down at her desk and took out a piece of paper and a pen. What did she have right now? Nothing. What did Daniel have? Everything. Money, legal documents, fake witnesses who would lie for him. But Daniel had one critical weakness that she could exploit. He was obsessed with appearing legitimate and legal. He built all his schemes to look perfect on paper, squeaky clean. Even Tommy's prison had been disguised as a home renovation project. And then it hit her like a lightning bolt. The house on Maple Street wasn't just a regular house. It was a historical landmark property with a charter written back in the 1960s. That charter was sacred law in this neighborhood. Any structural change to the building, any square foot of space seized or modified without a vote from the Neighborhood Historical Committee, was grounds for immediate legal action and loss of property rights. It was the ultimate sin for a historical landmark house. Daniel had built a secret room in the basement. He had cut through original support beams. He had modified the foundation structure. He had stolen space that was supposed to be shared utility access. Sarah grabbed her keys and ran back out into the night. She needed the town archives, the historical records, the original blueprints. The Maple Street Historical Archives were kept in the basement of Town Hall in the old records department. The keys were held only by the town clerk and the senior archivist, Mr. Raymond, who had worked there for 40 years. Mr. Raymond was the only person in town who didn't care about money or favors. He only cared about preserving history and following the rules exactly. Sarah knocked urgently on the basement door of Town Hall. It was late, almost 9 p.m., but she knew Mr. Raymond worked late on Friday nights, cataloging new acquisitions. "Who's there?" Cranky voice called out. "Mr. Raymond, it's Sarah Carter. Alex Carter's daughter. Please open up. I need your help desperately." The lock rattled and scraped. The door opened a crack and the wrinkled face of the old archivist peered out suspiciously. "Sarah!" He squinted at her through his thick glasses. "Good Lord, child, what happened to you? People are saying you've had some kind of nervous breakdown." "Mr. Raymond, Daniel is lying about everything," Sarah said urgently. "He's trying to steal everything from me. I need your help. I need to see the original architectural plans for 47 Maple Street from 1962. The old man looked into her eyes for a long moment. He remembered her as a little girl bringing him cookies at Christmas. He remembered her father, an honest man who had served on the Historical Preservation Committee for 20 years. "Lying, you say?" Mr. Raymond muttered. "I never trusted that husband of yours. His eyes move around too much. Not like our local people." He opened the door wide. "Come in, then." The archives smelled like dry paper and old history. Mr. Raymond pointed to the shelves with a gnarled finger. 1962, Section C. Right over there. He pulled out a massive dusty tube from the shelf. Sarah unrolled the yellowed blueprint carefully on the old wooden table. Blue lines, measured precisely to the millimeter. There was her house. Living room, bedrooms, kitchen, bathrooms. And there was the basement wall where Daniel had hidden Tommy. On the original plan, it showed empty space clearly marked common utility shaft and shared access crawl space. "Aha," Mr. Raymond said, looking over her shoulder with interest. "I remember now. There's a main water line that runs through that space. Can't touch that under any circumstances. It's a code violation. If you damage it, you could flood the whole block." Sarah took out her phone and snapped photos of the blueprints. "He didn't just touch it, Mr. Raymond. He cut a doorway through it. He built an entire secret room there, blocking access to the utility systems." The old man gasped and put his hand over his heart. "You're not serious." That's a criminal violation of the Historical Preservation Code. That's a structural safety threat. If the town inspectors find out about this, the inspectors are going to find out, Sarah said with grim determination. But first, the neighbors will. The same neighbors who are terrified of their property values dropping because of code violations. She started to roll up the blueprint to take with her, but her eyes caught another folder on the table nearby. The label read, Financial Records, 2014 to 2015, Tax Liens and Debt Collections. Sarah opened the folder out of curiosity. Inside were copies of legal notices for debts owed by residents to various creditors. She flipped through the pages until she found what she was looking for. A promissory note in Tommy's name. Amount: $90,000 secured by lien on family property. Date: September 15, 10 years ago. Mr. Raymond, Sarah asked quietly, her voice shaking. Do you remember when my father-in-law's funeral was held? How could I forget? The old man sighed heavily. September 15th. Poured rain that entire day. Terrible weather for a funeral. Sarah looked at the signature at the bottom of the promissory note. Thomas W. Carter. The signature looked rushed and shaky, somewhat similar to Tommy's actual signature. But Tommy had been at the cemetery that day from morning until evening. He had been so overcome with grief that Sarah and Daniel had to hold him upright. He couldn't possibly have been at a lawyer's office signing financial documents. But Daniel hadn't been at the cemetery for several hours that afternoon. He had said he was making arrangements for the wake and the reception. Sarah looked more carefully at the signature. At the end, there was a flourish that curved sharply downward to the right. Tommy always curved his signature flourishes upward to the left, but downward to the right. That was exactly how Daniel signed everything. She flipped to the next page in the file. There was a power of attorney document attached. I, Thomas W. Carter, grant Daniel R. Carter the right to sign all financial and legal documents on my behalf. Date: September 12th. On September 12th, Tommy had been in the hospital in intensive care with pneumonia. He had been unconscious and on a ventilator for 5 days straight. Sarah had sat by his hospital bed the entire time. Daniel had only visited in the evenings for an hour, claiming he was too busy with work. He forged everything, Sarah whispered, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. He created Tommy's debts using a fake power of attorney while Tommy was literally dying in a hospital bed. He manufactured the whole crisis. The pieces of the evil puzzle were finally falling into place. Tommy's crushing debts that Daniel had heroically saved him from were complete fiction. Daniel had created the debts himself, paid them off using Sarah's inheritance money, and used them as justification to lock his brother in a cage for 10 years. Sarah looked at Mr. Raymond with new determination in her eyes. Mr. Raymond, she said firmly, tomorrow is the monthly Neighborhood Historical Committee meeting. Is Daniel scheduled to speak? He is, the old man nodded. He's presenting his proposal to run for committee chairman. He's promised everyone reduced fees and modern improvements to the historic district. Perfect, Sarah said, carefully tucking the documents into her bag. I'll be there too. And I won't be coming alone. She took out her phone. She needed to make one critical call. A call to the one person Daniel feared more than anyone in the world, even though he thought that person was long gone and powerless. She dialed a number from her father's old leather address book, which she had kept in her gallery office for sentimental reasons. The phone rang for what felt like forever. Finally, someone picked up. Yeah, who is this? A gruff, annoyed voice answered. Hello, Mr. Morrison, Sarah said clearly. This is Sarah Carter, Alex Carter's daughter-in-law. I know who stole the construction equipment and materials from your company 10 years ago. And I know exactly where he'll be tomorrow afternoon. There was a heavy silence on the other end of the line. Then the voice answered with a sharp, dangerous edge that sent chills down Sarah's spine even over the phone. Give me the address, girl. I'm writing this down right now. Sarah hung up and looked at the clock on the wall. 11 p.m. 14 hours until the committee meeting. 14 hours to do what seemed impossible. She left the archives, thanking Mr. Raymond, who promised to guard the original records with his life. Then she headed back to her gallery. She needed to prepare herself, not just with documents and evidence, but with appearance and image. At the historical committee meetings on Maple Street, people were judged first by how they looked. If she wanted to be heard and believed, she had to look not like the crazy woman who had been dragged through the dirt yesterday, but like a queen returning to reclaim her rightful throne. At the gallery, she chose her best outfit. A sharp black suit with a white silk blouse. The one she had worn when she won the Mayor's Award for Downtown Beautification 3 years ago. She washed her face and hands carefully with cold water, covered the cuts and scrapes with makeup, and styled her hair perfectly. At 7 a.m., she called the only number that could help her find Tommy before it was too late. It was a huge risk, but she had no choice left. She called Riverside Medical Transport, the private ambulance service Judge Holloway had mentioned on the phone. "Dispatch," a sleepy female voice answered. "Good morning, this is Sarah Carter. Your crew picked up a patient named Thomas Carter yesterday from 47 Maple Street. I need to know which facility he was transported to. We don't give out patient information to random callers," the dispatcher snapped. "I'm not a random caller." Sarah's voice turned ice cold. "I'm the client. My husband Daniel Carter paid for that transport. He's having a problem with the billing and payment. He told me to tell you that if you don't want the state medical board investigating your special services for transporting people without proper consent forms, you'll tell me exactly where Thomas is being held right now." The silence on the other end of the line lasted forever. Sarah was bluffing completely. She didn't know if Daniel had even paid them yet. But she knew how these shady companies operated. They were always working in gray legal areas. Always afraid of investigations. "He's at Riverside Extended Care Facility," the dispatcher finally grumbled. "But you can't visit him. He's in the locked psychiatric ward. No visitors allowed without a court order." "I'll be there in 1 hour," Sarah said firmly. "Have him ready for discharge into my custody." She didn't go to the facility herself. She couldn't risk being seen and recognized. Instead, she sent the only person she could trust completely with this mission. Her gallery assistant and friend, Marcus. A strong, smart young man who had worked for her for 7 years and absolutely hated Daniel for his condescending attitude. "Marcus," she told him, handing him an envelope full of cash from the gallery safe. "Get him out however you have to. Bribe them, threaten them, whatever it takes. But by 4 p.m. this afternoon, Tommy needs to be here at the gallery, cleaned up and dressed in this." She handed him a garment bag containing one of her late father-in-law's old suits that she had kept for sentimental reasons. The day crawled by agonizingly slowly. Sarah sat in the gallery, going over the archive documents again and again. Every paper was like a nail ready to be driven into the coffin of Daniel's reputation. But the nails had to be hammered in at exactly the right moment and in exactly the right way. At 3:45 p.m., the back door of the gallery opened. Marcus walked in, supporting another man by the elbow. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. It was Tommy. He was still pale and painfully thin. His hands trembled slightly. But he was standing upright on his own 2 feet. Marcus had shaved his face clean and cut his hair neatly. In their father's old navy suit, which hung a bit loose on his thin frame, Tommy suddenly looked like the person Sarah remembered. An intelligent human being. Teacher. Brother. "Sarah," Tommy whispered. His voice still rough but getting stronger. "Marcus told me everything. Where are we going now?" "We're going home, Tommy," Sarah said, taking his shaking hand in both of hers. "We're going to take back our names and our lives." At exactly 5 p.m., Daniel stepped up onto the small stage in the community center on Maple Street. "Dear neighbors and friends," his voice, amplified by the microphone, echoed off the walls. "I'm so glad to see all of you here today. This year hasn't been easy for our historic neighborhood, But we've overcome every challenge together. We've repaired the old fountain in the park. We've replaced the broken streetlights on the corner. All of this was possible because of our unity and cooperation. Polite applause rippled through the crowd. People loved hearing that their problems were being solved for them. Today, I want to propose something new, Daniel continued, smiling warmly. The Maple Street Future Fund. I'll personally make the first donation of $50,000. This money will be used for landscaping improvements, new playground equipment, and new secret prison cells. Sarah's clear, ringing voice cut through the room like a knife through butter. Daniel froze mid-sentence. The microphone screeched with feedback. The crowd gasped collectively and turned to look. Sarah walked through the community center. She wasn't alone. She held Tommy's arm firmly. Behind them walked Mr. Raymond carrying a tube of blueprints, and Marcus carrying a box of documents. Sarah. Daniel went pale as a ghost. The microphone picked up every word. What are you, security? Remove this woman immediately. She's mentally unstable. 2 security guards moved toward her, but Sarah held up one hand commandingly. Stop right there, she said with such authority and confidence that they actually hesitated and stopped. I am a member of this historical committee. I am a property owner on Maple Street. I have the legal right to speak at this meeting according to the committee charter. She walked right up to the stage. Daniel looked down at her, but fear was already dancing in his eyes like flames. He could see Tommy. He could see that Tommy didn't look like a crazy homeless person anymore. Neighbors and friends, Sarah turned to face the packed room. My husband talks to you about the future and about landscaping. But he's completely silent about the past. And about the crimes he's committed. She pulled the 1962 blueprint from Mr. Raymond's tube and held it high over her head for everyone to see. Look at this, everyone. This is the official architectural plan of our neighborhood from when these houses were first built. It's a legal historical document. She threw enlarged photographs onto the table in front of the committee members. Photos of the secret room, which she had managed to take on her phone before everything exploded. He cut through a load-bearing support wall, she announced clearly. He created an illegal structure that violates the Historical Preservation Code and threatens the structural integrity of the entire block. And why? So he could hide a human being there like an animal in a cage. A shocked murmur ran through the crowd like electricity. Load-bearing wall. Structural damage. Code violation. Those words were scarier than any gossip or scandal. They touched everyone's safety and property values directly. That's a complete lie, Daniel shouted, losing his composure entirely. Those photos are fake. Photoshop. This woman is unstable and delusional. She hired an actor to play a dead man. An actor. Sarah smiled coldly. Tommy, step forward and introduce yourself to these good people. Tommy took a step forward into the light. He lifted his head and looked directly at the crowd with clear, steady eyes. I'm Thomas William Carter, he said quietly. But in the shocked silence of the room, every single person heard him clearly. I've lived in this neighborhood my entire life. Mrs. Chen, you used to give me piano lessons when I was 8 years old. Mr. Rodriguez, you taught me how to change a tire on my first car. Miss Webster, I was your student teacher at the elementary school. The senior citizens in the front rows began looking at each other with dawning recognition and horror. Oh my God! An elderly grandmother whispered loudly. It really is Tommy Carter. Those are his father's eyes. I'd recognize them anywhere. He's an imposter! Shrieked Judge Holloway from her seat in the front row, jumping to her feet. I personally witnessed Tommy's death certificate. I saw him being taken away by the coroner. This is some kind of con game. Daniel realized the situation was spiraling completely out of his control. Enough of this ridiculous circus, he yelled into the microphone. Security guards, throw these people out of here right now. This is my meeting. The guards moved forward again. There were 4 of them now. Big, mean-looking men. Marcus alone wouldn't be able to fight them off. But then the double doors at the back of the community center slammed open with a bang that made everyone jump. A black pickup truck with a company logo on the door pulled right up to the entrance, blocking it completely. The engine shut off and the driver's door opened. A stocky man with a silver beard and a walking cane stepped out deliberately. He had the weathered face of someone who had spent 40 years in the construction business and had survived every dirty trick in the book. It was Jack Morrison, owner of Morrison Construction Supply, the biggest supplier in 3 counties. Victor Morrison walked up to the stage, his cane tapping on the floor with each step. "Hello everyone," he said in a deep, commanding voice that needed no microphone. "Sorry I'm late to the party." He turned to look directly at Daniel. "And you must be Carter, the man who took out a $100,000 line of credit from my company 10 years ago for construction materials and equipment, then skipped town with the goods and declared the borrower dead to avoid payment." Daniel backed away from the microphone. "I don't know what you're talking about. This is some kind of mistake. I've never done business with you." "The mistake was thinking I'd forget or give up," Morrison said, pulling a document from his jacket pocket. "I spent 10 years tracking down Thomas Carter, thinking he had stolen from me and faked his death to escape. Turns out, you stole from me using your brother's identity and forged signatures. Then you hid the real Thomas to cover up your fraud." He held up the document for everyone to see. The original loan agreement with a forensic analysis attached. The signature was forged. The power of attorney was fake. The money went into shell companies and offshore accounts, all traced back to you, Mr. Daniel Carter. The crowd erupted in shocked gasps and angry muttering. This wasn't just neighborhood drama anymore. This was serious federal crime territory. "This is insane," Daniel protested. "You can't prove any of that." "Actually I can," Morrison said calmly. "I've already filed a complete report with the FBI Fraud Division. They're very interested in talking to you about wire fraud, identity theft, and financial crimes. The agent should be arriving any minute now." Sarah looked at her husband with no triumph in her eyes, only exhaustion and cold contempt. "You wanted to be the king of Maple Street, didn't you, Daniel?" she said quietly. "You wanted everyone to bow down to you and respect you. Well, look around. The kingdom is looking back at you now." She turned to address the residents directly. "Now I want all of you to ask Judge Holloway how much Daniel paid her to stay silent about Tommy being alive. Ask her about the roof repairs, the medical bills, all the payments documented in her personal ledger." All heads swiveled to stare at the judge. Judge Holloway shrank down in her seat, trying to become invisible. But hundreds of eyes were boring into her with accusation and disgust. "The trap is closed now, Daniel," Sarah said. The silence in the community center was deafening. Daniel stood alone on the stage, his fingers white from gripping the podium so hard. His perfect suit suddenly looked rumpled and cheap. His face had gone from confident to gray and old in just minutes. He searched desperately for even one supportive glance, one friendly face. But he found only walls of judgment, anger, and betrayal. Sarah stepped up onto the stage, standing between her husband and the people. She was no longer the victim. She was the prosecutor. And this community center was her courtroom. "You all heard Mr. Morrison's testimony," she said, her voice steady and clear. "But financial fraud is only part of Daniel's crimes. For 10 years, he kept my brother-in-law prisoner in an illegal structure. He fed him like an animal while he ate expensive meals at your dinner parties. He tricked me, his own wife, into financing that prison without my knowledge." She looked over the rows of shocked faces. "You all know me. I grew up in front of you. My father helped build half the houses in this neighborhood with his own hands. My mother sewed wedding dresses for your daughters. Did we ever lie to you? Did we ever cheat you?" The elderly residents remained silent, but their expressions were changing. The contempt for a crazy woman was being replaced by the horror of understanding the real truth. "And now look at him," Sarah pointed at Daniel dramatically. A man with no real roots here. A man who bought his way into your trust. A man who cut through the support beams of a historical landmark building for his 6 secrets. A man who bought your silence and your consciences with money. She turned to Judge Holloway, who was trembling in her seat and clutching a handkerchief. "Judge Holloway," Sarah said softly but firmly, "tell them the truth. Right now, this minute. Or tomorrow morning. I hand the police copies of your financial ledger showing every bribe, every payment Daniel made to you in exchange for your false testimony. Accessory to kidnapping carries a 20-year prison sentence. Even for retired judges." Judge Holloway jerked as if someone had slapped her across the face. She looked at Daniel desperately, then at the stern face of Jack Morrison, then at the angry faces of her neighbors who had trusted her for decades. Her survival instinct, honed by years of political maneuvering, kicked into high gear. She slowly stood up, her legs shaking beneath her. Her back was still straight. The judge was preparing to give her final statement. "I must confess something," she began. Her voice cracked, but she cleared her throat and continued louder. 10 years ago, Daniel came to me. He said Tommy was in terrible danger from violent criminals. He said Tommy had to be hidden to save his life. He asked me to sign papers confirming Tommy's death to protect him from his enemies. I believed him. I thought I was helping save a young man's life. "Liar!" Daniel screamed. "You took the money. You demanded the roof repair and the medical insurance. I have records. I accepted help from a grateful neighbor." Judge Holloway shot back, her voice rising with desperate self-preservation. "I had no idea he was keeping Tommy locked in a basement prison. I thought Tommy had moved away to start a new life somewhere safe. Daniel tricked me just like he tricked all of you." The crowd erupted into chaos. "Throw them both out," someone shouted from the back. "Criminals. Code violators. They're going to make our houses collapse. Call the real police." Daniel tried to step down from the stage, but Jack Morrison blocked his path with a heavy cane. "Going somewhere, son," Morrison said with a dangerous smile. "The police are already at the front gate. I called them myself before I came in." 2 uniformed police officers entered through the main doors. Daniel didn't resist when they put handcuffs on his wrists. He only looked back once at the windows of the house he had thought was his fortress and his kingdom. At the back entrance, another commotion was breaking out. Mrs. Patterson, trying to sneak away quietly during all the chaos with 2 huge suitcases, was stopped by Marcus, who grabbed her arm. "Leaving so soon, ma'am?" Marcus said loudly enough for everyone to hear. He unzipped one of the bulging suitcases roughly. Antique silver candlesticks, jewelry boxes, and family photo albums spilled out onto the floor. Everything that had belonged to Sarah and Tommy's parents and grandparents. "It's mine. He promised it to me as payment." Mrs. Patterson shrieked desperately. The police, having already secured Daniel, came back and took her into custody as well for theft. When the sirens finally faded into the distance, a new kind of silence settled over the community center. This one felt lighter, cleansing, like after a terrible storm finally passes. Sarah walked over to Tommy, who was leaning against the wall looking exhausted. He was staring at the ceiling as if seeing open sky for the first time in forever. "It's really over, isn't it?" he said quietly. "We're finally free." "Yes," Sarah said, putting her arms around him in a gentle hug. "We're home now. We're safe." 1 month later, autumn had painted Maple Street in beautiful shades of gold, orange, and deep red. Sarah sat on the front porch of number 47. She was wearing an elegant coat of her own design, custom-made just for herself. Beside her sat Judge Holloway. The judge looked quieter now, older, but she was still trying to maintain some dignity despite the scandal. She had managed to avoid prison by cooperating fully with prosecutors, but her reputation was destroyed forever. Now she was the one coming to Sarah, asking for advice on simple things like curtain colors and garden design. Sarah had become the new unofficial heart and Soul of Maple Street. Not through money or power or manipulation, but through truth and courage. Her neighbors respected her for standing tall when everything seemed lost, for cleaning out the corruption that had infected their community. Tommy came out of the house, looking completely transformed. Clean-shaven, wearing reading glasses, carrying a leather folder full of papers under his arm. He still walked with a slight limp, and sometimes a shadow of the horror flickered in his eyes. But he was returning to life, slowly but surely. The local college had rehired him as an adjunct professor in the education department. It turned out his old doctoral dissertation, thought to be lost forever, had been saved and preserved by one of his former professors. "Sarah, I'm heading to the library to work on my research," he called out, waving goodbye. "I'll be back for dinner around 6. Do you need me to pick up anything?" "Just grab some fresh bread from the bakery," Sarah smiled warmly. "And maybe some of those apple turnovers you like." She watched him walk down the street with growing confidence in each step. Then she looked up at the windows of her house. The secret room had been completely demolished and removed. The wall had been properly restored by licensed contractors under the supervision of the Historical Preservation Committee. Now it was just a regular basement again, flooded with natural light from new windows. Daniel was awaiting trial in county jail. His accounts were frozen. His reputation was completely destroyed. No one in the entire city would even shake his hand anymore. Mrs. Patterson was cooperating with prosecutors against Daniel, desperately hoping for a reduced sentence for the theft charges. Sarah breathed in the cool autumn air. It smelled like fallen leaves, wood smoke from chimneys, and most importantly, freedom. She pulled out her phone. A text message from a new client lit up the screen. "Mrs. Carter, when can I schedule an appointment for a consultation? I heard you create beautiful custom designs. They say you work miracles." Sarah smiled to herself and typed back a quick reply. Then she whispered quietly to herself, "I don't work miracles. I just know how to cut away the rotten parts and sow a new life from what's left." She stood up from the porch, straightened her coat collar and walked back inside. Back to her home. A place where there were no more secrets hidden in the walls. No more lies buried in the foundation. Just clean, honest space for a new beginning. And that, my dear friends, is the end of this story. A story about betrayal by the people who should protect us. About blindness in those who should see the truth. And about how the truth, no matter how painful or terrifying it might be, is always better than living in a beautiful lie. What do you think? Did Sarah do the right thing by exposing Daniel publicly? Or should she have handled it differently to avoid destroying so many lives? And does Judge Holloway deserve any forgiveness for her role in this terrible crime? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you or made you think, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Subscribe to JAMAL'S Stories so you don't miss any of our upcoming dramatic tales. And make sure to hit that notification bell. Take care of yourselves and the people you love.